Folks, welcome to another episode of Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. We have with us today first time guest, Dr. Antony Davies. It is going to be, hold on to your seats, it's going to be a good interview because we are going to discuss an article here called Politicians Turn Problems into Power. And folks, let me tell you something. This is an article you got to read for yourself. This brother does have a personal website, anthonydavies.org. Is that correct, Doctor?
AntonyDavies.org, no H. Yep.
Okay. And you got to go there. You'll see some educational videos there. Good stuff. And let me say a little bit more here about Dr. Davies. He is a Milton Friedman Distinguished Fellow at the Foundation for Economic Education and Associate Professor of Economics. And he's also the co-author of a book that just come out, Cooperation and Coercion. That's a fantastic book that you definitely want to get. I haven't had the chance to read it yet. I am going to read it and then do a review on my podcast about it later. And he also does his own podcast, Words and Numbers. Doctor, is that on Spotify or?
It's everywhere. All the major podcast players.
Okay, and folks,
Words and Numbers.
The name of that podcast again is Words and Numbers. Brother, let's go. We don't have much time. We have about 10, 12 minutes. That's the way we do most of my interviews here. And I wanted to talk to you about this article, Politicians Turn Problems into Power. Let me quote the first paragraph here. Congress is now poised to pass a $1.9 trillion stimulus package. This is following the $900 billion COVID relief deal in December, which followed the $2 trillion stimulus package in March. In total, the federal government has pumped $4.8 million into the economy over the past 11 months. And this was published in March of 2021. That's quite a bit of money. It's about $4.8 trillion. I get that number right, Doc?
That's right, $4.8 trillion.
$4.8 trillion, folks. Now, let me continue quoting from this article. I'm going to jump ahead a few sentences here. Adjusted for inflation, we have spent 20% more the United States spent on World War II. And the United States was involved in that war for about 4 years. On a dollar spent per month basis over the past 11 months, the federal government spent at a rate that is adjusted for inflation 5 times its rate of spending during World War II, end quote. Doc, why did you emphasize that? Why did you paint a picture like that for us?
Well, I think we hear politicians talk about billions and trillions, and people don't realize how large those numbers are. So the attempt here was to try and give people some kind of perception as to the magnitude of the money we're talking about. And the largest endeavor, well, not the largest, the third largest endeavor the United States has ever undertaken was World War II. And here we have the COVID relief. This is now the second largest endeavor we have ever undertaken. And we don't think too much about it. We say, well, the federal government's doing stimulus spending, whatever it is. It is gargantuan. Now, let me give you a different way to put this in perspective. We're spending $4.8 trillion. What else could we have done with $4.8 trillion? What we could have done is to cut the bottom 80% of households. So everybody except the top 20%, cut the bottom 80% of households checks for $50,000 each. That would have cost us the same $4.8 trillion. And you stop and you think about that and you say, well, hang on a second. The government's doling out. What did we get? We got a $1,400 check and a $600 check, and now it's going to be something else. I don't know what it is. We could have, with the stroke of a pen, eliminated poverty in the United States this year. Not just eliminate poverty, we could have eliminated the entire lower classes. The poorest American would have been solidly middle class. That's what we could have done for the $4.8 trillion we spent. Now, where did it go? Well, it went lots of places, but most of those places was not into people's pockets. It went to businesses and special interests and the cronies and whatever it is. Why? because politicians are looking not to solve our problems, but to solve their problem. And their problem is to get reelected. And how do they do that? Well, one is to stand up in front of the cameras and say, I'm working hard to fix this problem for you. And the other is to get campaign donations, support from moneyed, influential people. And that's where the cronies come in. And that's where the money went.
$50,000 per family. You could have
Yep.
gone to 80% of the U.S.
Yep.
population.
Yep.
Brother.
And when I did the math, and I write it in the article, I said, if you aren't boiling mad, you don't understand what's going on here, because I was boiling mad when I finally did the math on this.
Right. $50,000. Amazing. But this is the brilliance of your article is that at first I said, what does he mean? Politicians turn problems into power. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? I mean, you already hit upon it, but
because what happens is a problem comes along, be it a war, or be it terrorism, or be it COVID, or whatever it is. And the politicians say, I have a solution. And so we all cheer and we say, okay, we're going to elect you. And in electing the person, we hand over more of our money. We hand over more of our political power to this person, asking him to solve the problem. And he doesn't solve the problem. So he comes back the next election. And what does he say? He says, my plan would have worked except for those bad guys on the other side of the aisle. What you need to do is reelect me, and I'll spend even more money to fix this problem. And notice the weird thing that goes on here. The politicians actually can use the problems, and they prefer that the problems not get solved, because they can use them repeatedly to get elected and reelected. And if you want some good examples, look at the back and forth that's been going on for decades in this country about gun laws. And you have people on one side saying we need more gun control because we're killing people, and people on the other side saying, no, we don't need gun control because it's not the guns that kill people, it's the people that kill people, whatever it is. And we've had no resolution to this. In fact, forget about resolution. We haven't even moved the line on the field one way or the other for decades. Why? Politicians don't want to solve the problem. So long as the problem exists, they can keep pointing to it and saying, elect me, and I'm going to work hard for you to make sure that this problem gets solved. 4 years later, we forget what they said. We just notice the problem's still there. We say, hey, could you do something? They say, yes, I can.
Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm laughing because I absolutely love this. I'm speaking with Dr. Antony Davies. Davies, Dr. Anthony. He has his own podcast. Let me give you the name of that, Words and Numbers. And it's everywhere and anywhere.
Yes, sir, it is.
Please check it out, subscribe, download, do everything. This is a very powerful intellectual here. Brother, I'm gonna quote, and this is still part of the article, but you said here in the article, war and poverty began in 1965. The total amount spent since that time was on war and poverty programs, $23 million. Here's a direct quote from the article. If instead of spending $23 trillion constructing and feeding over 100 poverty programs for more than 50 years, what if the federal government had simply cut people checks? What would have happened? Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
That's $23 trillion, and you do all the appropriate inflation adjustments. And what it boils down to is, for the past 55 years, we could have been cutting every household in the bottom 20% a check for $10,000 a year. $10,000 a year, we would have eliminated poverty. We could have lived the past half century with zero poverty in this country. And yet, what happened? Poverty has remained since the war on poverty began. It's remained about 10%. It fluctuates a bit, plus or minus 3%, but it's neither trending up nor trending down. It's just pretty much this constant 10%. And we continue to spend money on these hundreds of poverty programs. The poverty doesn't go away. But for the same amount of money, we could have completely eliminated it. Now, why
you're talking about direct payments?
Direct payments to the poor. Now, why didn't we do that? Because when the politicians make direct payments to the poor, they don't gain political power and influence to themselves. The way they gain political power and influence to themselves is by increasing the size of government, increasing the reach of government. And so we have over 100 programs in this country that independently attempt to address different issues with poverty, be it food or healthcare, income assistance, or whatever it is, when all they had to do was cut a check to each household for $10,000, and that would have been it.
Has been it? Wow. Brother, we only got a couple of more minutes left, and I don't want to go too far off base, but what are some of your thoughts about this recent national discussion about increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour? Isn't that a direct payment?
It's not. It's different than a direct payment. It's different from direct payment in the sense that the government is pointing to employers and saying you must pay your workers $15 an hour. And here's where it gets different. The employer can look around, which is what he's going to do. He's going to look at his employees and he's going to say, who here's worth $15 an hour? The people who are worth $15 an hour, well, they'll get $15 an hour. The ones who aren't, they're going to get laid off. And with the money the employer saves from laying those people off, that's where he gets the money to pay the $15 an hour to the rest. And so politicians present minimum wage as a battle between the worker and the employer, and the government's going to step in on the side of the worker. And that's not it at all. It's a battle between the higher skilled, higher educated, higher experienced workers and the lower skilled, lower educated, lower experienced workers. And what's happening here is the government stepping in on the side of the workers who have the better experience, the better education, to the detriment of the very workers that we're concerned about.
And sometimes when you say to the detriment of those workers we're truly or should be concerned about, you're talking about like young people, aren't you? Like people don't have much.
It's young people, even more than that. It's specifically young people who come from poor households. The young people who come from middle-class households will tend to already have a leg up. Their parents they'll know people who have businesses who are looking for some help, or these are kids who are on the way to college, or maybe they're already in college, and so they're more attractive to employers. It's the young people who are less attractive to employers. And we say these words over and over. We say, you know what's wrong with the workforce? That you can't get a job without experience, but you can't get experience without a job. It's the catch-22. The minimum wage is what contributes to that. It's the first step into the door. If I can't get my foot in the door and get some experience, I can't start moving up that ladder to earn more in the future. And the minimum wage prevents me from doing that by saying, okay, go out and look for a job. But you know what? If you can't find someone willing to pay you $15 an hour, you're not allowed to work.
Wow. Folks, we're gonna conclude with that. Let me reiterate some things here. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. We just spent a powerful few minutes with Dr. Antony Davies. He's the co-author of a book that's just come out, Cooperation and Coercion. Get that book. I'm sure you can get that on Amazon, can't you, Doctor?
Yes, sir, you can.
Yeah. Please go to Amazon and get that. And also, please, wherever you get your podcast, tune into his podcast, Words and Numbers. Please do that, folks. Doctor, I really appreciate the time you spent with us. Hope that maybe sometime in the future you can come back and and share some of your very powerful ideas with us again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, boss.